Inside Angola, the most brutal prison in America, in the heart of Louisiana, there's a place so vast it once rivaled a small country, a former slave plantation turned into America's largest maximum security prison. Inmates call it a farm, but outsiders know it by another name. Angola, a place where the walls breathe history, and the ground still remembers the blood of those who never left. Tonight, we step inside the gates of the most brutal prison in America, and what you'll see will change the way you think about justice forever. The gates that never open. Louisiana State Penitentiary, a name that doesn't sound too different from any other correctional facility. But say Angola in the deep south, and watch faces tighten. It's not just a prison. It's a living relic. A 28-square-mile compound built on the bones of Plantation that once enslaved hundreds. When you drive up the long dirt road toward the main gate, you pass through fields of sugarcane, cotton, and corn, all tended by inmates wearing faded denim uniforms, watched by guards on horseback. The scene looks eerily like something out of the 1800s, except the rifles are modern and the overseers now wear badges. Angola holds over 6,000 men, most serving life without parole. Many will die here, never once feeling freedom again. The air itself feels heavy, thick with the sweat of men who have spent decades under the Louisiana sun. Inside, the first thing you notice isn't the noise. It's the silence. Not peace. Silence that feels forced. Every inmate knows what happens to those who raise their voice at the wrong time. They say Angola isn't just a prison. It's a world within a world. A place where time slows, where justice, morality, and humanity blur together. The stories that come out of here, of violence, redemption, brotherhood, and fear, are too unbelievable to be fiction. But they're all true. And to understand Angola, you have to start with how it came to be. A plantation turned penitentiary. Before it was a Louisiana State Penitentiary, Angola was a sprawling cotton plantation owned by Isaac Franklin, a notorious slave trader whose wealth was built on suffering. The land's name came from the country where many of his enslaved workers were taken, Angola in West Africa. When slavery ended, the system didn't vanish. It evolved. In 1880, the state of Louisiana leased the land to private businessmen who used prisoners as cheap labor. The conditions were brutal. Men were whipped, starved, and worked to death in the same fields their ancestors had once been enslaved in. By the early 1900s, Angola had become infamous for its cruelty. Prisoners lived in shacks with no plumbing, no electricity, and no mercy. Guards were given absolute power. Some carried whips instead of guns. One former inmate wrote, "We weren't treated like men. We were treated like property." The only difference between the old plantation and the new one was that now they called it justice. It wasn't until 1952 that Angola's horror truly came to light. A group of inmates slit their Achilles tendons in protest, an act of desperation that forced the world to pay attention. Newspapers called it the heel-stringing protest, and it sparked the first wave of reform attempts in the prison's dark history. But change came slowly. Even today, many say the spirit of the old plantation never left. It just changed uniforms. The code of survival. The first rule of Angola isn't written anywhere, but every inmate learns it within hours of arrival. Keep your mouth shut. Keep your head down. Keep your respect. Inside these walls, there's no room for mistakes. A wrong glance, a misplaced word, or an unpaid debt can end in blood. Angola operates under its own laws, ancient, invisible, and more fear than the ones written in the state's penal code. New arrivals, the fresh fish, are easy to spot. They walk differently, look around too much, still carry that flicker of hope in their eyes. Older inmates can sense it like sharks smell blood and water. The first few nights decide everything. Either you're tested and earn your place, or you're marked forever. At Camp D, known as the end of the line, discipline takes on a different meaning. It's where Angola houses its most dangerous, most uncontrollable inmates. The walls are stained with stories of riots, stabbings, and isolation cells where screams echo long after lights out. But the danger doesn't always come from violence. Sometimes, it's the psychological warfare that breaks a man first. Guards watch from towers with mirrored sunglasses. You never know who's looking or when. Food portions are small. Temperatures soar past 100 degrees in summer. Men sleep on metal bunks that burn to the touch. And if you think complaining will help, it won't. You might find yourself in a dungeon, Angola's infamous solitary wing, where inmates spend 23 hours a day locked inside concrete cells barely bigger than a bathroom stall. One man described it as being buried alive, only difference is you get to breathe. Over time, Angola teaches you its rules of survival. Rule 1, find protection. Rule 2, trust no one. Rule 3, never show fear. Because in Angola, fear is a currency, and everyone's trying to get paid. Brotherhoods and blood oaths. Walk through the dorms of Angola, and you'll see the invisible lines that divide the population. There's the Aryan Brotherhood, the Black Guerrilla Family, the Latin Kings, and dozens of smaller sets and alliances. They don't always wear colors, but they move together, eat together, and fight together. For many inmates, joining a brotherhood isn't a choice. It's survival. Alone, you're a target. With a crew, you're protected, as long as you follow orders. Inside these gangs, loyalty is sacred. Betrayal is a death sentence. Oaths are sealed not with signatures, but with scars, cuts made across the forearm, or symbols tattooed with makeshift needles and melted plastic ink. Angola's gangs don't just control the yards. They control the economy. Cigarettes, food, and contraband flow through hidden channels. Every trade, every favor, every debt is recorded, not on paper, but in memory. Even the guards, some say, play their part. In a place where pay is low and temptation is high, smuggling can turn into a business. But not every inmate gives into the code of the streets. Some carve out a different path. Through faith, every Sunday, the prison chapel fills with men who were once feared on the outside. They raise their hands, sing hymns, and cry. Angola is home to one of the largest prison ministries in the United States. For some, religion is a performance. For others, it's the only thing keeping them from falling apart. One former inmate said, "I came here a killer. I left a believer, not because the system changed me, but because God was the only one who listened." Still, redemption doesn't erase the past. The yard remembers. And in Angola, the past has a long memory. The farm. If you want to understand what makes Angola unique, you have to step outside the cell blocks, into the open fields. Here, prisoners work the land from sunrise to sunset, growing crops and raising cattle. It's a prison that feeds itself and symbolizes everything about the Old South. Rows of inmates march behind tractors, their denim uniforms soaked with sweat, the air filled with the hum of insects and the creak of saddles. Mounted guards circle on horseback, rifles slung across their shoulders, cowboy hats casting shadows across their faces. It's a sight that feels pulled straight from another century, because, in a way, it is. Each prisoner earns a few cents per hour. The work is mandatory for most. Those who refuse are sent to the disciplinary camps, places with names like Camp J and Camp D, where solitary confinement is a constant reminder of who holds the power. Angola's fields stretch for miles, bordered by the Mississippi River. When floods come, the water swallows the land, cutting off parts of the prison from the rest of the world. During those times, escape is impossible. Even if a man did make it out, the swamps, snakes, and armed patrols would finish what the guards started. The irony is hard to miss. Angola's nickname, a farm, is both literal and symbolic. It grows crops. It grows men. And sometimes it buries them. Because Angola isn't just a prison, it's a cycle. A system that feeds itself decade after decade, generation after generation. You enter through the gates as an inmate. You leave only when your name is carved into a headstone. The Warden's Kingdom. For decades, Angola was synonymous with chaos, riots, stabbings, and endless cycles of despair. But when Burl Cain became warden in 1995, everything changed. At least, that's what the world was told. Cain didn't come in swinging a baton. He came with a Bible. He believed that Angola's darkness could only be fought with light, that redemption, not punishment, could restore order. To some, he was a savior. To others, he was a ruler cloaked in scripture. Cain built churches inside the prison. He launched a seminary program through the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, training inmates to become ministers. He encouraged faith-based dorms, where men lived, prayed, and studied together. For the first time in Angola's history, violence dropped. Men who once carried knives now carried Bibles. National media called him the reformer of America's bloodiest prison. But beneath that halo, not everyone saw holiness. Some saw control. Warden Cain's Angola became a spectacle. He hosted annual rodeos where inmates, yes, actual prisoners, faced bulls, broncos, and the roar of cheering crowds. The Angola Prison Rodeo became a tradition, attracting thousands of visitors who came to see the spectacle of danger and defiance. Outside the arena, inmates sold handcrafted art, furniture, and jewelry. Tourists walked past death row cells to shop for souvenirs. It was part carnival, part church revival, part nightmare. Cain called it rehabilitation. Critics called it exploitation. But to the men living inside Angola, it was simple. If you wanted a better life behind bars, you played by Cain's rules. Obey the order. Attend church. Show repentance. And in return, you might get privileges others could only dream of. A better job, better housing, maybe even a recommendation for parole. But those who defied the system, they were buried in bureaucracy or sent to the hole. As one former inmate said, you could be a killer and find forgiveness if you prayed, but question the wrong person, and your salvation stopped at the gate. The prison rodeo. Every October, Angola transforms. The fences are dressed with banners. The bleachers fill with families, journalists, and tourists. Music blares through the loudspeakers. And under the hot Louisiana sun, men who once took lives now risk their own for entertainment. The Angola Prison Rodeo is unlike anything else in America. Inmates, wearing helmets and courage, climb onto raging bulls, wild horses, and unpredictable beasts, while correctional officers stand close, ready to intervene if things go wrong. Most of the time, they do. Events of names like Convict Poker, where 4 inmates sit at a table while an angry bull is released into the ring. The last man seated wins. Another event, Guts and Glory, challenges inmates to snatch a poker chip tied to a bull's forehead, a test of bravery and insanity mixed into one. Thousands cheer. Cameras flash. The men in the arena, for a few minutes, aren't prisoners anymore. They're performers. Gladiators. Some call it degrading. Others call it freedom. For the participants, the rodeo isn't just about money, though they can earn a few $100s if they survive. It's about something rarer, recognition. In a place where your name is replaced by a number, the crowd chanting for you, even for a moment, feels like resurrection. One inmate said, when that gate opens, it's like I'm alive again. Then the bull reminds me I'm not. Yet beneath the spectacle, there's an irony hard to ignore. The rodeo brings millions in revenue, some to the prison, some to state programs. But the men who risk everything inside the ring see only a fraction of it. Still, year after year, they sign up again. Because in Angola, even danger is better than invisibility. Life sentences and lost time. Angola isn't filled with short-timers. Nearly 75% of its population is serving life without parole. Most came in young and never left. To understand the emotional gravity of that, picture this. A man enters at 19. He's sentenced to life. By the time he's 50, the guards who booked him in are retired. The friends he grew up with are dead. He's still there, walking the same yard, wearing the same number, breathing the same heavy air. For these men, time isn't measured in hours. It's measured in seasons. When the fields bloom, when the rodeo comes, when the chaplain visits, those are markers of another year survived. The hardest part isn't always violence or hunger. It's the silence of being forgotten. Letters stop coming. Families stop visiting. And eventually, some stop hoping. Death inside Angola isn't dramatic. It's quiet. A man simply doesn't wake up. His body is taken to prison cemetery, a patch of land called Point Lookout 2. Rows of white crosses stretch into the distance, each marked only with a number and a date. If no one claims a body, it stays there forever. There's a saying among lifers. You come to Angola on a bus. You leave in a hearse. Still, Not everyone gives up. Some find purpose, teaching, mentoring, building programs that help others survive the system. And through that purpose, they find something Angola can't take: dignity. One inmate, who's been inside for over 40 years, said, "You stop counting the years. You start counting the people you helped stay alive." The walls have eyes. There's an old saying among Angola inmates: the walls don't just listen, they talk. Every corner of this prison is a network of watchers: cameras, microphones, guards, and informants. Even the chapels and workshops, the so-called safe spaces, aren't immune. Angola's security system is a fortress within a fortress. Towers stand like sentinels, their floodlights sweeping the fields long after midnight. Inmates joke that the light never goes off, even when they close their eyes. But what keeps most men in line isn't the guards or the guns. It's fear of snitches. Every block has at least one. An inmate who trades information for favors, a lighter sentence, an extra meal, or simply survival. They blend in, nodding quietly during conversations, memorizing every word. Then, when the time is right, they whisper it into the ear of a sergeant. And Angola rewards them. In a place where loyalty can mean death, information becomes the most powerful currency of all. Friendships are fragile. Trust is poison. An inmate might share a secret one night and wake up in the dungeon the next morning. The guards call it intelligence. The inmates call it betrayal. Even those who try to stay clean aren't safe. Some are framed, accused, or punished for crimes they didn't commit, not because they broke the rules, but because someone wanted them gone. "You can't hide here," said one former Angola lifer. "You can't even think here without someone trying to use your thoughts against you." Inside this machine, everyone becomes part of the game, whether they want or not. Some become predators, others ghosts, and those who refuse to play vanish quietly into solitary confinement. The dungeon. If you ever walk through Angola's Camp J, the notorious disciplinary unit, you'll understand why they call it a dungeon. The air is thick and stale. The smell of sweat, disinfectant, and rusted metal hangs heavy. The corridor echoes with the sound of steel doors clanging shut, a sound that can haunt a man long after he's gone. Cells are barely the size of a closet. Inside, a metal bunk, a toilet, a small slot for food. The lights stay on 24 hours a day, and silence isn't optional. It's enforced. Some men spend months here, others years. Officially, it's called administrative segregation. In reality, it's psychological warfare. You eat alone. You speak to no one. Your world becomes 6 feet of concrete, and the voices in your own head. Some inmates scream to stay sane. Others go quiet, too quiet. Angola's dungeon isn't just a punishment. It's a test of how much humanity a person can lose before he stops being a person at all. Guards walk past with clipboards, eyes forward, never looking inside the cells for more than a second. The men behind the doors aren't seen as inmates anymore. They're numbers, maintenance problems. If one dies, another fills the space before sunrise. Human rights groups have called Angola's isolation practices inhumane. The prison's response? We do what's necessary to maintain order. But order has a price. And inside the dungeon, that price is sanity. One man spent 28 years in solitary. When he was finally released, he said, "I forgot how to hear silence." The men who refuse to break. For all the pain and control Angola inflicts, there are men who refuse to be erased. Men who fought back with intellect, resilience, and sheer willpower. The most famous were known as the Angola Three: Herman Wallace, Albert Woodfix, and Robert King. In the early 1970s, the three men, all members of the Black Panther Party, were accused of murdering a prison guard. They claimed they were framed for their political activism inside Angola. What followed became one of the longest solitary confinements in U.S. history. Woodfix spent 43 years in isolation. 43 years, longer than some lifetimes. During that time, he educated himself, studied law, and wrote about injustice from a cell barely big enough to stand in. He became a symbol, a voice echoing beyond the walls. When he was finally released in 2016, he said, "They couldn't break me because I refused to hate. I learned that hate is the enemy of freedom. The Angola 3 story forced the world to look closer at what was happening behind those gates. Lawsuits were filed. Journalists came. Cameras rolled. And for the first time, Angola's shadow began to crack. Still, the system didn't crumble. It adapted. The dungeon stayed. The walls remained. And Angola continued, as it always had. Under new names, new faces, same ghosts. Because inside Angola, history doesn't disappear. It just changes uniforms. The Death House, at the far edge of Angola, past the fields, the rodeo grounds, and the chapel, stands a building that almost looks forgotten. No noise, no movement, just a faint hum from the fluorescent lights that never turn off. This is death row. Locals call it the Death House. For the men inside, it's the last stop on the road through Angola. Here, time doesn't heal. It counts down. Inside the narrow tier, each cell holds one man, his world reduced to concrete metal bars and a single slit of light from a hallway. No one here talks much. When they do, it's through the cracks in their doors. Conversations drift like ghosts about appeals, lawyers, or memories of a world that stopped caring decades ago. The men on death row live in a strange rhythm. Breakfast at 3 a.m. lights out at midnight. Every sound echoes, footsteps, keys, the opening of the slot that brings food trays. Each day feels the same until one doesn't. When the final order comes, the prison goes silent. Even the guards speak softer. They call it the walk. A man is escorted down a dim corridor, his wrists shackled, ankles chained. Guards walk beside him, not out of malice, but duty. They've done this before. Too many times. At the end of the hall sits a small room with a cross mounted on the wall and a long table in the center. The table has straps. The air smells of disinfectant and metal. The execution chamber at Angola has seen more than 80 men die since the 1980s. Lethal injection replaced the electric chair, but the ritual hasn't changed. The condemned man is strapped down. The 4 lines are inserted. A warden asks for his final words. Sometimes he says nothing. Sometimes he prays. And sometimes he looks directly into the observation window, straight at the people watching, as if trying to remind them he was once alive. When it's over, the witnesses leave quietly. The body is wheeled out, covered with a white sheet, and taken to the morgue. Unless the family claims it, it will be buried at Point Lookout too, alongside hundreds of others, nameless, forgotten, equal only in death. One former chaplain said, "You start to realize the state doesn't just kill the guilty, it kills the hopeless."